Before the world knew days or nights, before the sky held stars or the Nile carried life, the universe lay in a silent darkness. From this stillness rose Atum, the first consciousness, the lonely creator we met in part 1. But Atum did not remain alone forever. As creation unfolded, his essence transformed into a new force, one more radiant, more powerful, and more visible than any god before him. This transformation gave birth to Ra, the sun god, whose light became the heartbeat of existence. While Atum represented the beginning, Ra represented continuation. He was the pulse that moved creation forward. The Egyptians believed that the moment Ra opened his eyes, light filled the cosmos, pushing back the darkness of none and revealing everything that had been shaped by the early gods. Ra was not merely a bright star in the sky. For the Egyptians, he was life itself. Every dawn was his rebirth, every noon his strength, every sunset his journey into the deep unseen world. The world lived because Ra moved. Without his daily voyage, there would be no growth, no warmth, no balance. His name was invoked constantly, by farmers at sunrise, by travelers crossing the desert, by kings receiving their crowns. Even the shadows cast by buildings and temples were considered extensions of his divine presence. But Ra did not travel alone. He carried with him an entire cosmology, an army of spirits, gods, and protective forces who accompanied him on his journey across the heavens. The sky itself was his great ocean, and his boat, the Manjed bark, sailed elegantly from one horizon to the other. As Ra sailed across the sky, the world below awakened to his warmth. Flowers opened, animals stretched toward the sun, and humans began their work. Everything was synchronized with the rhythm of his movement. To the Egyptians, Ra didn't just bring daylight. He structured time itself. Every morning, as the first thin line of gold approached the eastern horizon, the Egyptians believed Ra was reborn. He emerged from the body of Nut, the sky goddess, just as a newborn emerges from the protection of a mother. This rebirth was not a metaphor. It was a literal truth to them. Each sunrise was a reminder that the universe had survived another night, that order still held, and that chaos had once again been defeated. Ra's journey began aboard his Manjet bark, the boat of millions of years. The moment he rose, his light spread across the land in slow, deliberate waves. Shadows retreated, temples glowed with amber light, and the desert revealed its shifting colors. The world awakened not because morning arrived, but because Ra decided to rise. His ascent marked the start of earthly activity. Farmers stepped out into their fields, believing the sun's warmth helped their crops. Listen to the prayers spoken over them. Artisans opened their workshops, trusting that Ra's gaze would steady their hands. Even the royal scribes waited for the first rays before writing the day's records, as though Ra himself was witnessing each stroke of ink. By mid-morning, Ra reached the height of his power. He stood at the center of the sky, fully radiant, watching over every corner of Egypt. This moment, the zenith, symbolized clarity, strength, and purity. It was said that no lie could survive under the light of Ra, and thus this hour became sacred to judges, priests, and rulers. Important decisions were often made at noon, when the sun's presence seemed closest to the earth. But the journey was not endless. As the day stretched forward, Ra began his slow descent toward the west. The Egyptians saw this not as a decline, but as a transition. Ra was preparing for the next phase of his cosmic duty, the descent into the shadowed realm beneath the world. At sunset, Nut's arms reached out once more, drawing the sun back into her body. Yet this return was not peaceful. Sunset marked the beginning of danger, for Ra had to leave the human world and enter the unseen. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky blazed with reds and oranges. This was the moment Egyptians believed Ra passed from life into death. Only temporarily, only symbolically, but powerfully enough to remind the world that even gods followed the cycle of existence. Night signaled Ra's departure from the mortal realm. But his work was far from done, because once he entered the western horizon, the real battle began. When Ra slipped beneath the western horizon, the world above settled into darkness, but the god of the sun entered the most perilous part of his daily cycle. For the Egyptians, night did not simply fall. Night was a realm, a world beneath the living one, known as Duat. It was a place filled with winding rivers, caverns of fire, gates guarded by spirits, and the restless souls who wandered between life and eternity. Ra entered Duat aboard his Mesektet bark, a vessel built not for light, but for protection. Unlike the bright man-jet boat of daytime, the night boat carried shields, blades, and divine guardians. The passengers aboard were not passive. They were warriors, magicians, and protective deities chosen to accompany Ra through the most dangerous journey in the cosmos. The underworld was divided into 12 regions, each representing an hour of the night. As Ra passed through each hour, the journey grew more treacherous. In the first hours, the boat glided across still waters, guided by spirits who kept records of the dead. These early regions were calm, almost peaceful, lit by the dim glow of Ra's diminishing light. But the deeper the bark traveled, the more chaotic Duat became. In the middle hours of night, Ra confronted rivers of fire, lakes of serpents, and caverns where the souls of the damned cried out in silence. Yet even here, order existed. Priests in the world above recited ancient spells carved into the Book of Gates and the Book of the Amduat, ensuring the safe passage of the sun god. Every invocation spoken in a temple warm with torchlight was believed to echo in the halls of the underworld. But nothing compared to the looming terror that awaited Ra in the deepest part of Duat. There, in a realm where even shadows feared to move, lay Apep, also known as Apophis, the great serpent of unmaking. Apep was not merely an enemy of Ra, he was the embodiment of chaos, older even than the gods themselves. Where Ra represented light, Apep represented the absence of all things, patternless, endless, formless destruction. Each night, Apep tried to swallow the sun, to drag Ra back into the eternal darkness of Nun. The clash between them was cosmic. The bark shuddered, the waters roared, and the serpent coiled around the boat with jaws wide enough to consume eternity. The gods traveling with Ra, among them Set, ironically the most skilled in battle, struck the serpent with spears of light and spells that burned like lightning. Priests in the world above assisted the struggle. At specific hours of the night, they would strike images of Apep, spit on them, stab them, and burn them, believing these actions weakened the monster in Duat. The victory each night was never guaranteed. The Egyptians understood that order survives only through constant effort. Finally, after a fierce struggle, Ra overcame Apep. The serpent fell back into the chasm, wounded but never destroyed. Because chaos could not be eliminated, it could only be held at bay. As the 12th hour approached, Ra transformed into Khepri, the scarab god of rebirth. Pushing the sun toward the eastern horizon, he rose once more into the world of the living, bringing dawn to Egypt and assuring the people that the cycle of existence continued for another day.
The solar temples, the priesthood, and the power structure of Ra's cult. As Ra's influence expanded across Egypt, his worship grew into one of the most sophisticated religious systems of the ancient world. Temples dedicated to him were not merely places of prayer. They were cosmic engines designed to mirror and maintain the universe itself. The greatest of these stood in Heliopolis, the city of the sun, where the first mound of creation was believed to have risen from the waters of Nun. Unlike the shadowed sanctuaries of other gods, Ra's temples were built to embrace light. Vast courtyards, tall obelisks, polished white limestone, and open-air altars allowed the sun to flood every corner. When dawn arrived, the first rays pierced through aligned doorways and corridors, illuminating sacred carvings, as though Ra himself was walking through his own house. But the heart of Ra's power lay not in stone, but in the hands of his priesthood. The priests of Heliopolis formed one of the most educated and influential institutions in Egypt. Many came from noble families. Others were scholars who spent their lives studying astronomy, mathematics, and sacred texts. Their duty was not only to honor Ra, but to maintain the cosmic cycle through ritual. Each morning, long before ordinary citizens awakened, the high priests performed the first ceremony of the day. They entered the sanctuary carrying incense, oil, and offerings of bread and beer. They chanted hymns praising Ra's rebirth and recited passages describing his journey through Duat. Their words were believed to strengthen the sun god, giving him power to fight Apep once more the following night. The priests' rituals were not symbolic. They were necessary acts in the Egyptian worldview. If they failed to speak the correct incantations, if an offering was misplaced, if a hymn was recited poorly, then Ra's strength could falter. The sun might rise dimmer. The Nile might not flood in time. The land might suffer. In this way, the priests carried the weight of creation on their shoulders. Ra's cult also shaped the political structure of Egypt. Pharaohs claimed to be the sons of Ra, chosen by the sun god to rule the two lands. Their crowns displayed the uraeus serpent, representing Ra's protective fire. During coronation ceremonies, the new king was said to receive the light of Ra, symbolically merging his soul with the power of the sun. This connection was not merely ceremonial, it was strategic. By linking themselves to Ra, pharaohs gained legitimacy, authority, and divine protection. Heliopolis became a center of political influence, where priests and rulers forged alliances and debated the nature of kingship. At times, Ra's priesthood grew so powerful that it rivaled the authority of the throne itself. The solar temples also served as centers of science and astronomy. Observatories were built atop their roofs, where priests charted the path of the sun, moon, and stars. Their calculations guided agriculture, festivals, and the calendar itself. The 365-day Egyptian year was shaped by the heliacal rising of Sirius and Ra's cycles across the sky. Yet another example of how deeply the sun governed life. Every ordinary Egyptian, regardless of status, felt the presence of Ra daily. Farmers prayed for sunlight, sailors navigated by its position, artisans arranged their workshops to follow its hours, and mothers lifted their children toward dawn as a simple blessing. Even the poorest villager lived within Ra's warmth and walked beneath his watchful eye. In this way, Ra was not just a god. He was the rhythm of existence, the clock of the cosmos, the silent ruler whose presence shaped every breath of the world. The rise of Aten and the solar revolution of Akhenaten. As centuries passed, Ra's influence remained unchallenged, until a moment in Egyptian history when one pharaoh dared to reshape not only religion, but the very identity of the sun itself. This pharaoh was Akhenaten. a ruler whose vision would fracture the old order and create one of the most dramatic religious revolutions the ancient world had ever seen. Before Akhenaten, Aten was merely an aspect of Ra, the visible disk of the sun, the circular brilliance that illuminated the heavens. Aten was light without form, a divine presence without human shape or mythic history. But to Akhenaten, this simplicity was not a weakness, it was purity. He believed that Aten represented the sun in its truest, most universal form, no falcon-headed emblem, no bark, no battles through Duat, only the radiant disk whose rays touched every living thing. When Akhenaten ascended the throne, he began to challenge the power of the traditional priesthoods, especially those of Amun and Ra. He saw them as too powerful, too wealthy, and too deeply involved in politics. Their temples were independent kingdoms, their rituals ancient and complex. Akhenaten wanted a religion focused not on ritual, but on direct connection with the divine, through sunlight, life, and openness. Thus began one of the boldest acts in Egyptian history. Akhenaten declared Aten the supreme and sole god. The transformation was swift and dramatic. Temples of Amun were closed. The name of Amun was erased from monuments. Sacred carvings were chiseled away. Even references to other gods were restricted. What once had been a pantheon thousands of years old dissolved almost overnight. Aten's worship looked unlike anything Egypt had ever seen. His temples had no roofs, no dark chambers, no hidden sanctuaries. Instead, they were open to the sky, bathed in sunlight at all hours. Worshippers stood directly beneath Aten's rays, believing that the beams, often depicted ending in tiny hands, offered blessings, life, and guidance. Akhenaten himself became the high priest of this new order, often shown receiving Aten's energy with his queen, Nefertiti, and their daughters beside him. To symbolize this break from the past, Akhenaten built an entirely new capital city, Akhetaten, the horizon of Aten. The city rose on untouched land between desert cliffs, its temples aligned so that at sunrise, Aten appeared perfectly between the mountain peaks. From this sacred vantage, Akhenaten declared that he alone understood Aten's will, making him both king and prophet. But while Atenism was radiant, it was also fragile. It lacked stories. It lacked emotional roots. It lacked the deep symbolic structure that Ra's mythology had offered for generations. Ordinary Egyptians struggled with a god who had no myths, no personal form, no comforting rituals. They could not see themselves in a perfect circle of light, and the priesthoods, stripped of their power, waited patiently. After Akhenaten's death, the old order surged back with force. The temples reopened. The erased names were restored. Aten returned to being an aspect of Ra, not the supreme deity. Akhenaten's city was abandoned, left to crumble in the desert. Yet his revolution did not disappear entirely. He had transformed the way Egyptians thought of the sun. He had elevated the idea of light itself as divine. He had shown that even the oldest myths could be reshaped by human vision. And so, in the long arc of Egyptian religion, Aten remained a reminder that the sun was not only a god of tradition, but a symbol of possibility, renewal, and the courage to redefine the sacred. Even after thousands of years, the presence of Ra has never truly faded from Egypt. His image, whether as a falcon-headed king, a blazing solar disk, or a newborn scarab, remains carved into temples, painted on tomb ceilings, and etched into the memory of a civilization that once shaped the ancient world. To understand Egypt is to understand the sun, for every aspect of their life, belief, and identity was illuminated by Ra's eternal light. Ra's influence extended far beyond mythology. It lived in the architecture of Egypt, temples aligned to solstices, obelisks carved as frozen rays of sunlight, pyramids angled precisely to capture the heavens. Even the Great Pyramid, one of humanity's most extraordinary achievements, was designed as an instrument of cosmic alignment, pointing toward the celestial regions where the pharaoh's soul was believed to join Ra in the sky. But Ra's legacy was not limited to stone. It shaped the structure of kingship itself. Each pharaoh ruled as a living embodiment of Ra's authority, a human bridge between the sun and the earth. Their coronation names included titles such as Son of Ra, affirming that their divine legitimacy flowed directly from the solar god. To rule Egypt was to uphold Mayat, the same balance and order that Ra defended every night in Duat. And just as Ra protected the world from chaos, so too was the pharaoh expected to protect Egypt from disorder, injustice, and foreign threat. The myth became the model. The god became the law. The sun became the throne. Ra's legacy reached the everyday people as well. Farmers watched the sky for signs, knowing their crops depended on the sun's warmth. Sailors read the winds and shadows as divine messages. Children learned hymns praising Ra's journey across the heavens, reciting them at dawn as the horizon glowed. Even sleep was tied to Ra. Night was not a simple absence of light, but a sacred space where the god traveled beneath the world, guiding lost souls and restoring cosmic balance. In medicine, Ra's light symbolized healing. In art, it symbolized clarity. In moral life, it symbolized truth. The Egyptians believed that lies, corruption, and cruelty flourished only in darkness. To live in the light of Ra was to live honestly, in harmony with the world around you. As centuries passed and empires rose and fell, Ra remained a symbol far bigger than the civilization that first worshipped him. Greek scholars equated him with Helios. Romans honored him as Sol. Early philosophers saw in him the archetype of divine order. And even today, the sun remains humanity's most universal symbol of life, hope, and renewal. When we see a sunrise, we witness the same moment that ancient priests believed was Ra's rebirth. When we watch the colors of dusk, we witness the same descent into the underworld that they believed kept the universe alive. The story continues, not because the myths survived in books, but because the sun still rises, still falls, and still calls us to remember something older than history itself. Ra's cycle, birth, strength, decline, and rebirth, became a model for time, for life, and for the rhythm of existence. It shaped Egyptian calendars, rituals, festivals, and even architecture. More importantly, it shaped their spiritual psychology, teaching them that darkness is temporary and that every night is followed by dawn. And so, the legacy of Ra endures. In every sunrise, in every story of rebirth, in every symbol of light conquering shadow. To the ancient Egyptians, the sun was not just a star, it was a promise. That order can return, that renewal is possible, and that even in the deepest darkness, light will always find its way back to the horizon.